Welcome back to our show. This week, as we've been promising the last several episodes, we are going to talk about when our kids feel nervous or anxious about coming to Starfish Social Club or about coming into the group. Usually this happens when kids are new, when they first start attending, and sometimes it can be prolonged. Sometimes it can take a while for our kiddos to feel more comfortable and kind of more safe and more natural here. But we usually see it happen pretty quickly. But it is something that we notice when kids are new. It's not usually something that we see after kids have been here for a while. But we do want to talk about what that looks like here and how Ramiro and I support our students through those moments. So that's our main topic for today. And if we have time left over, we're going to jump into a couple other stories as well. Side note, we just hit our 1-year anniversary for this podcast. The only reason I know that is because the podcast host sent me just a generic automated message that said, happy 1-year anniversary of your podcast. Otherwise, I would have had no idea. But, what I found really interesting about that is that when I go back and I look at our episodes, we have about 25 when we hit the 1-year mark. We had about 25 episodes, but the majority of them, probably 2/3 of them, we've recorded in the last couple months since we've been doing this kind of style, instead of me just having to think of something to talk about. I can talk about anything and everything, social skills on any given day. That's no problem. But I really like this free flow where you and I can just talk about our kids. And so since we've been doing this, we are much more consistent with getting the episodes done.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing that happens is we keep a running record of the things we want to talk about. And that list gets really long if we go too long without recording an episode. So this week, I think we're doing 3. This is our second one this week so far. And I think we're doing another one tomorrow because we're trying to keep up with all the things we want to talk about. But it really made me think about how there's kind of the ways that people say you're supposed to do things. It applies to anything, any topic that you want to think about. But podcasting, people say, you need to do an episode every week, and it needs to be the same day of the week that your episode is coming out, so your audience knows to expect it. I just don't function that way. I'm not a consistent person. I'm a persistent person. I'm not a consistent person. But I just find it interesting that once we shifted strategies for what we're doing on the podcast, it's become so much more consistent. And I just thought that was a really important message when it comes to our kids as well, that there's so much out there about the way that things should be done. Even, those of you guys that are parents and teachers, which I would imagine is almost everybody who listens, you guys know that we can't parent our neurodivergent kids the same way that we would parent a neurotypical kid, or the same way that you were parented, right? It does not work. And the same with teaching. We can't use the same strategies and have the same outcome when our kids think differently. So I just really love that concept. Maybe that's something that we'll explore a little bit more, but there's nothing that has to be done a certain way. There's nothing that you'll be successful if you do it this way, and you're going to be a horrible failure if you do it this way. So I thought that was a really cool concept, that in the last few months, probably the last 3 months, is when our podcast has been the most consistent and has put out the most episodes, even though it's been around for a year. And I think sometimes it's just a matter of finding what works for you and finding your groove. So hopefully that'll be helpful in terms of all the kiddos that are out there in the world that have parents or teachers listening, that, just allowing our kids to explore and to find the path that works the best for them. Because that's when they will be the most successful, is by doing the things that work the best for them. All right. On that note, here we go. So talking about kiddos feeling anxious or nervous, anytime this comes up when I'm meeting a new student, one of my biggest goals is to normalize that feeling. We all feel a little bit anxious or nervous when we go somewhere new or when we're in a situation we've never been in before. All of us do, right? For some of us, it may just be a little bit, but we all have those thoughts of, what if I don't know anybody? What if I don't get along with anybody? What if I can't find anybody that I want to talk to or hang out with? What if I'm, there for 2 hours and it's really boring? I mean, we all have thoughts like that when we're in situations that are new or different. I think our kids, it gets a bit compounded because a lot of our kids have had challenging social experiences in school, maybe in other therapeutic settings. Some of our students have been dismissed from other therapeutic settings. We've had kids in our program who have been arrested at school. We have kids in our program who've, been kicked out of schools, even daycares.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we have kids in our program here who have had some social trauma. And again, because of who our target population is, it's kids who have a hard time connecting with other kids. And so, however old they are, they have this history of struggling to get along with other kids. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. And so then you come somewhere like this and you're told, hey, you're going to go to this place and make friends. And they're like, bah! How many times have I tried that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's really important to us that we normalize the feeling of being nervous and anxious. Ramiro and I normalize all feelings here. Every emotion is okay. It's always okay to feel the way that you feel any time of the day, any given day. And I've noticed that when we bring that up in the group, the longer we talk about it, the more the kids automatically have that response.
Mm-hmm.
However we feel is always okay. It's always okay to feel the way that we feel. So we really normalize feeling nervous and anxious. So we have three students that we're going to talk about that have all started in the last couple of weeks with us, that have all experienced that anxiety. And, it shows up differently in different kids. But we want to share what that has looked like and what we have done to help support those kiddos. And in just the couple weeks, the progress that has been made for all three of these students. Is there anything else you want to add before we jump in?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the first student is, she's been here 2 weeks now. Most of our students come 1 day a week. We do have an option for students to split their schedule and come on 2 days a week. Most of our students do 1 day a week, and it's for 2 hours. So our program is an hour of class time and an hour of game time. This student is an elementary student, and the first day that she came, her schedule is that she has class time for the first hour and then lesson time for the second hour. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. Let me start that over. So lesson time and class time are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we use interchangeable language, but I just use the same words to talk about two different things. So yeah, first hour she has class/lesson time. And then second hour she has game time. That would have been super confusing. Thank you. So when she came in the first week to class time, totally fine. That her group is really chatty. And so while we're getting ready for the lesson and we're waiting for everybody to get here, they're just talking. They're just, movies or video games or whatever. They're just chatting. And so she came in and everybody was chatting. And then we got started with our lesson. And I don't know how far it was into the lesson, but at some point she started crying.
I think it was pretty much at the beginning.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I pay attention to is how is this coming from authentic emotions, or is this coming from, I need some attention? Is this coming from, I've done this in the past and this has gotten me a lot of attention? And just to tell a side story, when we used to have a school here at Starfish Social Club that we ran, and we had a student in that school who had some pretty extreme behaviors. And I remember one time she was rolling around on the floor, yelling and screaming, and everybody was ignoring her and kind of walking over her and walking around her. And after a while, she sat up and she said, she was like 11. She said, you know, when I used to do this at my last school, everybody would stop and ask me what was wrong. And I just said, yeah, probably so. Here, that's not really how it works. Here, we actually prefer to spend our time with the kids who aren't yelling and screaming and rolling around on the floor. And then I just walked on, and we did not have another incident like that with her. So in other settings, sometimes it's really disruptive when kids, do certain things, and kids learn that. And so they continue to do it because they know what kind of response they'll get. We have a student here with us now that at school was making suicidal threats because she knew that she would get sent home for it. We have a student here now who in the past used to run away at school because then she wouldn't have to do what she was being asked to do if she just ran away. So I am always trying to pay attention to the clues to see, is this student truly having a difficult time, or is this something that they've learned as a maladaptive coping skill? And what we noticed about her is that everybody else just continued the class. None of the other kids said anything about it. They just, our classes are really engaging. And so everybody else is just engaged in the discussion. Nobody said anything to her. Nobody said anything about her. But what Ramiro and I started to notice is that when she was engaged in what kids were talking about, she wasn't crying. And then if there was like a 2-second pause, or if one of us started talking again, then she would start again. So that's one of the things I look for is this a consistent emotional state, which is a clue to me that this person is having a hard time regulating themselves, if it's a consistent emotional state, or does it ebb and flow based on what's happening and based on their level of interest in what's happening. And so we noticed it was ebbing and flowing.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say another thing that I did notice that day too was if you and I weren't making eye contact with her, then her crying would stop. But then as soon as I made eye contact with her, she would like instantly like change her facial expression and like, start trying to cry again because I noticed her, or because I looked at her. So yeah, that was another clue too.
Yeah, that's a good one. So Ramiro and I just continued the class, went for the rest of the hour. And at the hour, most of the kids in her group stay for game time. And then additional kids come in for game time. So we have a transition that happens. Now it's game time. So she was kind of following me around and still crying and saying things like, I want to go home. I want my mom. And it's totally okay to feel that way. It is okay to feel like you want to go home. It is okay to want your mom. Sometimes I feel like I want to go home too. Right. It's totally okay to feel that way. And then she said something to the effect of, nobody's even saying anything about me crying, something like that. Nobody's paying attention to me crying, or nobody's saying anything about me crying. And so I said, yeah, that's because everybody else is playing games now. So before we were in class, we were having our lesson, and now we're all playing games. And so they're paying attention to the other kids that are playing games. Probably for about 20 minutes into game time, she was kind of following me around. I miss my mom. I want to go home. And so at one point we stopped and had that conversation again, that I noticed that all the other kids were playing together and she wasn't. And I said, it's going to be pretty boring to just hang out during game time until it's time to go and not play a game. So my suggestion would be pick a group that you want to play with and go find something to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I removed myself from the situation because we're not into power struggles here. I removed myself. And the next time I walked back into that room, this child was laughing and smiling and playing a game with other kids. I mean, just like that. I did not expect to see that when I walked back in the room. And then she looked at me and she said, "Look, I'm playing a game with other kids." And I was like, "Yes, you are." In the next 40 minutes, we were totally fine. Right?
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Okay.
literally like the transition. Like, yes.
Yeah, I think it was just us repeatedly not giving attention to the
Mm-hmm.
crying, not giving attention to kind of, what she was looking to get attention for.
Yeah, like coddling or
Yes.
mhm.
And I even would comment, say, "Hey, I'm going to go pay attention to the other kids who are playing a game because that makes me feel more comfortable."
Mhm.
And so I think it's just that repeated message and her realizing that that's how it works here, right? Just to say, if we had felt like she was truly having a hard time, we would have approached it very differently,
Mhm.
which is the case with our second student. It's a very different situation. But that was the story with our first student. And then last week was her second week here.
Mhm.
So second week here, repeat of first week, right? She comes in, she's fine, but then we start the lesson, same thing. She's crying. She's turned around in her chair. Same thing. And
Mhm.
so we responded same way. None of the other kids said anything. Nobody said anything to her. So at the end of the lesson, I just said to her, I noticed that all the other kids were busy talking to each other and paying attention to each other. And now we're going to game time and they're going to play games with each other. And so if you want to play a game with somebody, you got to jump on it, right? You got to get in there and get in the group. I just am a little concerned that if you cry for the whole hour of the lesson, they may feel a little bit uncomfortable playing a game with you. So if you want to play a game with somebody, this is the time, right? This is the transition. This is the time. And off she went. And that was it. That was the end of
Mhm.
that. So week 1, we had about an hour and 20 minutes, I would say,
Yeah.
of her crying and 40 minutes of sunshine. Week 2 was maybe an hour of her crying and then an hour of her playing games and being with the group. So our goal for this week is maybe 30 minutes of her crying, if at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's, we talk so much here about how we are built around natural social consequences. And the natural social consequences of the choices that she made is that the other kids just weren't even paying attention to her. Nobody was rude to her. Nobody said anything about her crying. Nobody made any kind of rude comments or anything. They just chose to pay attention to the class and to the conversation that we were having. And then at game time, they chose to go play games with the kids that they wanted to play games with. So now that she's had 2 weeks of experiencing the fun that is game time, I'm hoping that, she'll see that the more engaged she is with the group during the lesson, the more likely they are to see her as someone that they want to play with during game time.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add to her story?
No, that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, it's exciting because within just the first 2 weeks, we already see the transition happening. We see
Yeah.
the understanding like behind I guess just like the natural social consequences of, maybe sometimes that may work at home or that might work with her teacher or something like that, where she can like try to, get attention in that sort of way. But she's beginning to learn that in like natural social situations, that won't always be the case. And that will, as she gets older, that will become less and less what's going to happen.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And I think too, um, there was never a time during game time where she showed any other signs of needing attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so just for us to be aware of that, right? Sometimes kids truly need adult attention. There was never another time during either week where she showed any signs of needing adult attention. She was totally fine to play with the kids and do what they were doing.
Yeah.
So that's something to notice as well. So that was first story. Second story, a student in the same group, actually. So same schedule. We are big on starting our classes on time. We are respectful of the kids who are here on time. So we get started on time. And so we got started and hadn't seen this student. And again, it was his first week here, but we get started on time and we shut the doors when we're starting. So that there's not distractions and that kind of thing. Kids are always welcome to come in late, but we have started if they're late. We're not waiting for people. So we went through the lesson and did not see him. And you might have to help me with my memory on this one, but I think but
this one, his first week, when he came in, he was just in the waiting room, right?
With his mom.
Yeah, and so you were like in between.
Oh,
like, right? Is
okay. So I think I had gone out to look for him because I know we had already started.
Yep.
So I think I had gone out to look for him, and he and his mom were in the waiting room, which is just on the other side of the door. And he was not looking good, and he was not willing to come in. And so I just sat out there for a bit and chatted with him, because I really, when I can sense that it's a genuine wall, I really want to create that emotional safety. So I just sat out there and chatted with him. And what I ended up doing was opening the door between the waiting room and the rest of the building, and opening the door to the classroom. And I stood in the hallway. So Ramiro was teaching the class inside a room, and I stood in the hallway so that I could engage him in the waiting room with what was going on in the classroom. So Ramiro would be talking about something, I would kind of repeat it to him. And then if Ramiro was asking the group a question, I would ask him the question, and he was not engaged at all. But my goal was for him to be part of the group in whatever way I could make that happen. So that's how we spent the lesson time, was Ramiro and the rest of the group in the classroom, and me standing in the hallway and kind of facilitating with him in the waiting room, just to try to engage him. And then at least he also was part of what we were talking about.
Yeah.
He wasn't missing the concepts that we were talking about, because our lessons are progressive. So if he would have missed the first lesson, it would have kind of been difficult to move on from there. So then game time came around, and mom decided she was going to step out into the main part of the building. He was not willing to come in for game time. We even asked some of the other kids in the group if they would go invite him in, which they were really excited to do. And he was not open to that. So mom was sitting in like the entryway of the building, which you can see through our window. And so he just stayed in the waiting room the whole time. There was one time where we had a student who was playing Battleship and looking for a partner. And I took the Battleship set out there and asked him if he would be willing to be the student's partner. He was not willing to do that. So again, we could tell that this was a different situation than the first student. We could tell that this was a genuine, I am super uncomfortable. I do not want to come in. I don't know what's going to happen. So that was his first week here. His second week, which was last week. Another thing that mom mentioned is that they got here late.
Oh yeah.
And I will say, even for our kids who don't normally have anxiety, coming in late provokes that.
Yes.
Right. It's the same as, as an adult, if you walk into a meeting late or you're late to an appointment. And when I worked in school, I used to see this so often, that kids who were chronically tardy develop this sense of shame about being late. And especially because as a kid, it's hardly ever on them. It's traffic, or it's, maybe dad got home from work late, or it's, something happened with dinner and we had to go get something from a drive-through on our way here. I mean, all kinds of things, but very rarely is it on the kiddo that
Mhm.
they were late. So there's a lot of anxiety that gets built up when kids are late, especially if it's a chronic thing. Um, Side note, super glad I don't have kids because I am one of those people who's chronically late. And so for me to like have a child that I was putting in that situation, oh my gosh. Okay. Side note. But so his mom mentioned during week 1 that, they came in late. And so absolutely, he was already anxious about coming here, and then they were late. So he was completely unwilling to come into, he doesn't know the kids. He has not met them. He's met me. But he's now completely unwilling to come into the group. So week 2, which was last week, again, 5:00, he's not here. So we start the class, and what ended up happening, we didn't know, but what ended up happening is mom convinced him to come in from the waiting room and into another room that we have that we use for game time. So it's empty during the lesson time, but it's across the hall. So mom could hear what we were talking about in class and was basically doing what I was doing during week 1 and was engaging him in the conversation that we were having with the kids that were in class. We didn't know that. We didn't know that they were in there. So when transition happened to game time, he was already in the facility. He wasn't in the waiting room anymore. He was now behind the doors,
Yeah.
right? Behind the curtain. So have our transition to game time. He's sitting on the floor against the wall. All the other kids just make their groups, pick their games, and have at it. And so a group of kids his age who are in his lesson time, but whom he has not met, right? Because he hasn't been there yet, went in that room to play a game. And he continued to sit on the floor. And it occurred to me, one thing that I notice with our kids who are socially anxious is that they think that if they ask to join a group or play a game, that they're going to be rejected. At Starfish, the only time now the kids can say no to anybody. They all have the autonomy and authority to say yes or no to anything. We don't make anybody play with anybody else here. But the only time that I really notice that happen is if they've already started a game and they don't want to start over. But then they'll say something like, you can wait till we start over.
Yeah.
Sometimes they will start over. Sometimes they'll completely clear the board or take all the cards back and start over so that someone can join them. It just kind of depends. But at no point is anybody just flat out rude and says, no, you can't play. But I can tell that with our kids that are socially anxious, that's what they think is going to happen. So once I kind of put those pieces together, I said to him, I guarantee if you ask to join a game, the answer will be yes. And I pointed out that I think there were like 4 different games going on at that time. So I said, this group is playing this group is playing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. And he still didn't do anything. So I finally just went up to the group that was in his room and said, hey, can so-and-so join you guys? And of course they're like, yeah, sure. And he did. He walked over and there wasn't an extra chair. And so I just said, if you want to stand, that's fine. If you want a chair, go grab one from the other room. Because I wanted him to take the initiative to do it. So he leaves, go grabs a chair and comes back. And now there's 5 kids playing Uno. Just like that. And so it was just that little thing of recognizing that he needed someone to make that transaction happen for him. He needed someone to provide that safety net of knowing that he could join a game. And then that was pretty early into game time, maybe 15 minutes in, maybe. So then he spent the whole rest of game time playing in a group. I think he did something different too. I don't even think he stayed.
Yeah, he played a couple different games. I forgot what else he played.
Yeah.
Maybe like Battleship or something. But yeah, he switched groups once or twice, but whatever he ended up doing, he was playing the game. He was engaged in the group. So yeah.
Yeah. And then I pointed out to him before he left that 2 or 3, I think 3 of the other kids he was playing with were in his lesson time. So I wanted him to know that when he comes at 5 o'clock, now he already knows some of the kids. Now they've already made that connection and they've played games together, so that when he comes in next time, they'll be familiar to him. So that was his second week here. And Mom and I talked about how she stayed in the entryway again. So we talked about how this week she's going to leave. She's not even going to stay in the entryway. And she even said, it reminds me of, pre-K drop off
Yep.
when you just have to say goodbye and leave, So I really, really, really love and appreciate it when we're on the same page with parents, and we are doing hard things here, but we all know that we're doing it for the best interest of the kids.
Yes.
So, asking a parent to leave, right, is a hard thing. Asking a kiddo to come in when they don't want to. I mean, we do hard things here sometimes, but it's really amazing when we all recognize that we're doing it for the best interest of the kids.
Absolutely.
Anything else for his story?
I don't think so, but yeah, I mean, just touching on that last bit, it's very, I mean, we've noticed that it's very beneficial for everyone, even if it is hard. But like, if the parents are able to trust the process and like, accept that that their student might temporarily feel upset or they will be uncomfortable, but understanding that that's okay, and that's okay for them to feel those things, because in order to learn and to grow and to get beyond that point where they might be stuck with something, that it has to happen. And so they're okay with letting Steph and I and our teaching assistants like take over and like try to help them navigate their way through those difficult situations.
Yeah, absolutely. We have had a couple times where parents were not okay with that, and have removed their kids from the program, which is really heartbreaking for me, because I know that kiddo is just going back to whatever they came from, right? So whatever reasons they have for struggling to make friends when they came in, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty heartbreaking for me when parents aren't as open to their kids going through the hard times, to be able to have the outcomes on the other side, and yeah, it's different. Some kids don't have a hard time when they come here. Some kids are like sponges, and everything we talk about, they're like, oh, okay. And then they're doing it, right? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh, I didn't know that, right? And then they're doing it. Other kids are really resistant. And then some kids are somewhere in the middle, but I think so. We're almost at our 7-year anniversary. Oh my goodness. And remember, you've been here almost 4?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. We've only had, I would say, in 7 years, maybe 2 students that I would say have not made progress here.
That's true.
And
only
really,
2.
yeah, it really comes down to one of them. There were some mental health challenges going on. And he was not always able to be socially functional when he was here. Which was really kind of devastating to see. And then, we've had another kiddo that just really was not interested in being part of the group, was not interested in other kids, and so was not receptive to anything that was going on here. But those are the only 2 kids I can think of that I can honestly say have not made progress here. Everybody else, oh my gosh, sometimes we'll sit here and be like, remember 4 years ago when this kid started? Sometimes the kids talk about it too. They'll talk about how things used to be versus how they are now. And, we've got students who are teaching assistants now. I mean, how incredible is that? We had another student ask us yesterday if he could work here. So we have a student that's in middle school that tells me that when he's 16, he's going to work here. So I guess he thinks it's like a rite of passage. I think that, when you're old enough, you can work at Starfish. But I think that's so cool that we have students who are now employees here. I mean, they get paid to work here, and we have students that are looking forward to when they can be an employee here. I just think that's so incredible. So, one more story. This kiddo just started last week. He's waiting for a spot on our waiting list. And so in the meantime, we sometimes have the option for students just to attend game time with us while they're waiting for a spot in our lessons. So that's what he's doing. He just started last week. All these 3 kids are elementary, so they're all younger. Our program starts at age 7, so they're all younger. And he came into game time, and not the same level of anxiety as the other kids. His was actually a little more discreet. I feel like anxiety is really easy. It's really easily overlooked.
Yeah.
It can look like aggression. It can look like defiance. It can look like a lot of different things. And I think it gets overlooked so easily, because it doesn't always look like the kid who's crying and doesn't want to come in. It can be the kid who's yelling. It can be the kid who threw his phone across the room. It can be the kid who refuses to do what he's asked to do. All those can be anxiety. So this kiddo came into game time, and our only expectation at game time is that whatever you're doing it with at least one other student. So whatever, you can have a conversation, you can make up a game, you can play an actual game. It's just got to be with at least one other student. So he came in, I was talking to someone else's parent. And so when I came in, he and Ramiro were having this discussion because he was playing by himself. So I'll let you pick that up, because I'm not sure kind of what transpired with that.
Yeah. So, first, it was awesome for him to be able to come in with other students during game time, and like instantly like wanting to grab a game, wanting to do something that the group was doing. But yeah, the other students had ventured off and like chose their groups and like chose their games and stuff. And so he picked a game, but there was no one else to play the game with. And so I was just reminding him, that if you wanted to play a game, we just got to find someone else to play with. And it was interesting because like I know he wasn't trying to be rude. He wasn't trying to be mean. He wasn't trying to be like
Defiant.
Yeah, but like his comment to me was like, well, I don't really want to play with anyone else. I was like, oh, well, how come? And he said, because I'm the only person here who doesn't look weird. I was like, wait, can you say that one more time? I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. He said, yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone else here looks weird. Like everyone just looks so different. And I said, oh, there it is. Everyone here is just different. That's it. We all have different skin color. We all have, different features. Some people wear glasses. Some people don't. Like we're all just different. And that's all that is. And he's like, yeah, but I'm just the only person who doesn't look weird. And so I was trying to figure out what to say at that point, because like we all look different, but I was trying to figure out like how to present it in a way that shows that doesn't have to stop us from meeting new people or like playing games with other people. And so honestly, I think that's when I went up to you. I was like, Steph, what would you say?
And what's interesting about that is that while all of our kids here are neurodivergent, they are not, in some settings, kids physically look different. Our kids here don't, right? Most of our kids are in regular classes at school. All of our kids are verbal. All of our kids, are conversational. We have one kiddo who's got physical disabilities. He wasn't even here that day. And so our population of kids definitely, I wouldn't say falls into that group of kids that you can look at and how you can go out in public or you can be in a school and you can see that there are some kids that have different needs than other kids, right? You can physically see that. Our kids are not in that category. Our kids have more of what is sometimes called invisible disabilities. And that's one of the struggles for our kids often is they look quote unquote normal. And so people expect them to act quote unquote normal. right? That's actually one of the challenges for our kids, is that social difficulties are an invisible disability. You can't look at somebody and tell that they have a hard time with social skills, or that they might say or do things that are shocking or inappropriate or random or whatever. So when Ramiro told me that he said that, we were both just kind of like,
Yeah.
what? Like, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
And so I had just come in the room when that happened, and I reminded him that we just have to do something with somebody else. And sometimes I just get these flashes that kind of tell me what to do next. Like I get these downloads from the universe that just say, okay, do this. So I just got this download, and it said to just start putting his game away. And so that's what I did. I think he had Battleship.
Yes.
But there was nobody else playing with him. So I just took the other board and started putting the pieces away. And I said, okay, we're going to put Battleship away, because everybody else is playing something different. So while we're putting Battleship away, do you want to join? And then I was just telling him whatever the other kids were playing. So I don't know, maybe Sorry. I think some of the kids were pretending. For sure. There was a group that was running around pretending. And then there was a group that was maybe playing Uno or something. So I said, okay, while we're putting this away, do you want to join the group that's pretending or the group that's playing Uno? And he just started mirroring me, and he started putting his pieces away, and it was super easy. And then we got the game. I asked it. He actually, I think on his own, remembered where to put it back on the shelf. So he put it back on the shelf. And then at first he went to go see what the kids who were playing an organized game, like what that was like. And a couple minutes later decided he didn't want to do that. The other kids who were playing the pretend game were his age. They were elementary kids for the most part. And they just run around. I think that's the group that hides the blocks. Yes. Okay. In the last couple weeks, they've made this new game where they take Jenga blocks, and one person is the hider, and everybody else is supposed to not look. And the hider hides them around our building. And then the other kids have to go find them. That's the game. They love it so much. So he joined that game. And after a few minutes, the kid who's probably the de facto leader of that group, he said, he's not even playing it correctly. And I said, what is the only way that he would know how to play this game correctly? And then the kiddo was like, oh, we have to teach him. And then so they did. I was like, yeah, so this is his first day here. Explain it to him so that he knows what you guys are doing. And so he did, right? He explained to him how it worked. And then everybody knew what to do. And then the rest of game time, he was with that group.
Yeah.
So 40 minutes, probably 45, maybe. Yeah. He was running around with that group. So he'll be back today. And my thought is that it will be a much quicker transition for him. It is sometimes difficult for kids to come to terms with the fact that other people don't want to play the game they want to play. And also, usually kids make game choices fairly quickly when they come in. And so if you're not quick on it, you end up holding a game and everybody else is off doing something else. Yeah. But it's never personal, right? It's not about you. It's not even always about the game that you have. It's just that people are having conversations and making plans, and then they go implement those plans. So I think the kids learn that the quicker you jump in and you make a decision, the quicker you can start playing a game. Yeah. So we're going to add one random story to the end of this because it has to do with the kids playing the game with the blocks. So we're going to add that to this episode as well. And I'm going to let Ramiro tell this story because he was the main character in this situation, the main adult figure.
Okay. So, I don't even remember how this game started, but they all of a sudden decided.
I think it started as a joke.
I think so too. Yeah. But basically, yeah, it's basically hide and seek with Jenga blocks. So one person goes around our, couple classrooms and they pick some obvious spots where to put them, but then they also try to figure out ways to hide them, like in the chairs or like under the tables. to make it a little bit more difficult. And so we have a couple of clocks hanging on our walls, one in the hallway that even elementary school students can reach. And then we have a clock that's a little bit higher up that they can like try to stretch for in our classroom. Um, and so one of the students figured out that they can like lift up the clock in the hallway and stick a Jenga block in between the clock and the wall, and then like push it back in so that there's now a hidden Jenga block behind the clock. And
So clever, these kids.
yes, and so that was added into the game, like a new hiding spot was discovered. And so they were continuing with that for a few rounds, and then one of the students noticed the clock in the classroom, and he tried to reach for it, but he couldn't really reach it, and so he asked me to help him put the Jenga block behind the clock. And so I thought, okay, yeah, sure. Like, I didn't think much of it. I just thought, okay, yeah, this is a cool new hiding spot for the block. And so, after that round was over, they discovered that that's now a new hiding spot that they can put a block. This maybe a round or two later, instead of the student who was hiding the block asking me or Steph to help them put the block behind the clock, that always rhymes. That's I've seen that so many times. They try to do it themselves, and so when they were reaching for the clock, it's just on like a little push pin, and so they try to like, I guess, raise it off the wall to like stick the block behind it, but the clock ended up falling, and when it hit the floor, a couple pieces flew off of it, and the clock function, like the hands, stopped working. I was in a different room at that point, but I heard the clock fall, and I heard like the reaction from the students. And so when I came up to them, I asked them, "Oh, what happened? What happened with the clock?" Knowing already that like they were trying to hide the block behind it. But they were like, "Oh, so and so kicked the wall, and all of a sudden the clock fell down, and so now the clock broke." And so already I knew that wasn't true, but because they were trying to like say that a student who wasn't even playing that game did it by kicking the wall.
That's not even attached to the clock.
Yeah.
It's not even the same wall.
Yeah, exactly. And so I knew that wasn't true, and I made sure that they knew. Like at that point, I knew that they weren't going to tell me the truth initially, and so I said, okay, first of all, I am not mad. I do not care that the clock broke. Steph does not care that it broke. We just want to know what happened. I just want to make sure that we understand that if it was an accident, that we're able to try to fix it or try to figure it out, so that way this doesn't happen again. But they were still, they weren't open to telling me the truth. And this was like already towards the end of the hour, like when they were about to leave and stuff. And so the last 5 minutes or so, I was just going back and forth with them saying, okay, look, I'm not mad. I don't care. I'm not upset. You're not going to get in trouble. We're not going to email your parents. We're not going to tell them when you get picked up. It's not a big deal. I just want to know what happened. But they wouldn't tell me. And so I said, okay, well, I don't know if we'll be able to play this game next week, because I don't know what happened, and I don't know if there's a solution to making sure that this kind of a thing doesn't happen again, because we want y'all to stay safe. We don't want, stuff to get damaged on accident. So unless we have a solution, or we, come up with a way to make the situation better, then we may not be able to play this game next week.
And that's the natural social consequence,
Yeah,
right? If
yeah.
we don't know something about this game caused a clock to break. So the natural social consequence is we probably won't be able to play this game again, because what we were trying to do is get them to come up with how can we keep that from happening again.
Mhm.
But when they wouldn't even acknowledge what happened, right? So, but I was in another group, and it's the timer goes off for transition, and I come in, there's a kid crying, right, over it. And then I walked out with another kiddo to talk to his mom about something, and he's super distraught because they won't be able to play the game again. So we've got one kid who's crying about the clock being broken, one kid who's on the verge of crying because they can't play the game again. But that shows us that we have a window to address this again next week, because they care, right? It matters to them. It means something to them. So next week, we have the window to talk about it again.
Yeah, exactly. And so the following week, like almost the first thing that that these two students, like when they walked in, really the first thing they wanted to talk about was the clock. They wanted to play the game. They were super excited to play the game again. So like naturally they wanted to try to figure out like how to work through it. And so when they came in, the student who like tends to be the leader of that group, the first thing he said was, "I'm sorry if we broke the clock. We did not mean to break the clock. It was an accident. Um, but we really want to play the game again. So how can we what can we do to make this better?" And I said, "First, thank you so much for apologizing. Like I said, we're not mad. We couldn't care less about the clock being broken. I just wanted to know, or I just want to be able to work through it with you so that way it doesn't happen again." And so the other student said, "Oh, well, I think we can, we can try to mend it. We can mend the clock." Which for an elementary school student, I think that was really impressive for him to know what the word mend means, because I did think about it for a second. But yeah, he's like, we can glue it. Let's just try to glue the pieces back together. Um, and I said, okay, great idea. Like, knowing that even though they glued the little pieces back on the clock was not going to be able to function properly still. The point for me was, and for Steph, is for them to try to just work through
To
it
try to
and to
make it
make it
better.
better.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so both of the little guys, they grabbed tape because we didn't have any glue, but they grabbed tape and they both worked together. Like, one person held the piece in place while the other one like worked around his hand to like try to get the tape like where it needed to go. They did a great job fixing that clock. It looked really good. um, and so I was like, okay, awesome. Thank you so much for fixing the clock. How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again though? And they were like, well, we can ask for you or Steph to help us put them in higher places so that way we're not trying to, reach up and, trying to move clocks around or whatever. And I said, yes, perfect. Ask us for help if you need someone to reach up higher to get a block like on top of the door, like on the door frame or something like that. And so they apologized because they felt like it would help the situation to, for us to know that they acknowledged that what they did caused something to break. I don't know if I said that well at all. But yeah, so they apologized because they felt that would be best, and that that they felt bad for what had happened, and then they fixed the clock, which again doesn't really matter in the end, but for them to try to make it better, that was awesome. And then they had the solution to ask for help next time and not just try to move things around or potentially break something again on accident. So yeah, 3 things that helped make that situation better, and they were extremely happy to play that game again this past week.
Yeah. And yeah, like you keep saying, we do not care when things get broken. I mean, it's just, we work with kids, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we do not care. Our goal is just to problem solve so that doesn't happen again. That would be the same, like if somebody accidentally hurt somebody else, right? Okay, how can we keep that from happening again, right? So yeah, we have zero concern over accidents happening. We do want the kids to recognize their level of accountability, right? That yes, this is because this happened, and then for them to problem solve how it can not happen again. And so yeah, that's exactly, their kids, stuff is gonna get broken.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just like you said, how can we work through this so that the same thing doesn't happen again? And yeah, once they did that, there's no there is no, you can never play that game again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no punishment for that. It was an accident. And they were able to take accountability for it. They did the best they could to fix that darn clock. It just doesn't function anymore, but yeah, I mean, it was an accident. They did the best they could to fix it. We all move on from it. So yeah. Awesome. Okay. Next episode, we are going to share just some kind of random stories about situations that have happened here over the last couple of weeks that we just want to share how we respond to them and how we handle them. So kids having a conflict during a game, the concept of reading the room, which is when you walk into a situation and you try to figure out what's going on, and the importance of developing that skill. Conversation we have often, but it came up again last week around the concept of complaining. A lot of our kiddos have a reputation for being complainers. So we'll recap a conversation that we had last week about that. The concept of being outvoted. We actually do not vote on things here at Starfish. We find ways where everybody can get what they want. So we don't do voting systems here. We don't do anything like that. But it came up last week when some kids were trying to solve some problems. And we figured out a way that everybody in the group could get what they wanted instead of majority rules, because that teaches kids that their opinion or their needs don't matter if it's not the majority. And so that's not how we function here.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about all that next time. We'll see you guys then.